Hi, this is Andrew Sears. I'm the president of City Vision University, and in this lecture, I'm going to talk about how to improve your AI prompt engineering for research. Now, the term AI prompt engineering has become popular in the past, uh, few years since AI and ChatGPT emerged. And one of the key things to realize that as a researcher and as a doctoral student, your effectiveness as a researcher, possibly more than anything else, is going to be determined how effectively you can write AI prompts. Now, most of you start with AI prompts and you think about, okay, this is like typing something into a search engine. You don't spend a lot of time on it. There's been cases whenever I write an AI prompt and I could have written a paper and it might be a 10-page paper, but I write the prompt and I might spend a half hour or an hour thinking through the prompt and actually going through several iterations of the prompt. And, it might have taken me, 5 hours to write the whole paper. So I'm spending 10 to 20% of my time thinking through that prompt. So that's what we're really talking about whenever we're talking about AI prompt engineering. So it's almost like you're outlining a paper and you're explaining, a summary of what you're going to do. And in many cases, that's how you can get a really good response on prompts. There's a lot of other things you can do, and I'll give you some, tech tips and tricks along the way. So, um, probably the most significant thing to realize to improve your AI prompt engineering is it's something like riding a bike. You're not going to learn about it by watching, and you got to do it a lot. So you're going to learn by doing. So it's like learning a language. You get better by practice. So you need to be practicing hundreds of deep research reports each year during your doctoral program. And you should be using Gemini similar to a web browser throughout your day to answer your questions. And I would encourage you to actually try to use it more than you're using a web browser. I always have a Gemini tab open on my computer, and whenever I have questions, I always think, do I go to a web, um, you know, a, a sorry, a web search is what I should be saying rather than web browser. Do I go to a web search or do I go to Gemini? And much more, I end up going to Gemini. Um, if you're not tech savvy um, and you need help, and this is just a tip for how you might be able to get help. So we're having you do a lot of highly technical things in this course. So anytime you run into a tech problem that you might ask someone who's tech savvy how to do, you need to ask Gemini that because it's really good at those type of things, and it can often help you solve 99% of your questions on how to do something with technology. It's really good with how-tos. The other suggestion that I have is keep your own AI prompt log in a Google Doc and record, especially your complex prompts because you may want to reuse components of those in the future. Um, so learning by doing is by far the biggest. But the second area is learning by observing. So review and learn from prompts you used at the bottom of the Gemini Deep Research articles that we've provided in your courses. So, as I mentioned, some of these articles I could have spent 10 hours writing a lecture on that topic or 5 hours, but instead I wrote a prompt because what I'm trying to do, I'm not trying to be lazy. What I'm trying to do is give you the best course possible. And I've already spent 100 some hours designing the lectures for a course in some cases because as I mentioned in this course the lectures are almost like writing a book, but there's other things that I'd like to do and I don't have, it's not worth spending 400 hours. So what I want to do is to try to fill that in with a really customized article that will fit the context of the course. So if you look at the prompts that I'm doing, then that can be helpful for you. So learning from your peers' prompts. So we have you document things whenever you share a Google Deep Research report. You always need to include your prompt. So learn from that. I have my prompt log, and you can build um, on AI prompt suggestions at City Vision, and I'll jump into those a little bit later. So some other things on AI prompt engineering for research. So using documents, so uploading documents into Gemini. So there's a lot of different things you can, have it analyze a document. And this is something that's entirely appropriate, is that you can have Gemini critique your papers. And I think that's actually a really good use. Now, we say that you're not supposed to have Gemini write for you, but if you have an argument and, that you're trying to present in a paper, you can say, put that in, and you can have a long dialogue around that. You can say, okay, give me, critique of this paper, analyze the holes in this argument, analyze things that I might, want to add to strengthen the argument, and things along those lines that can be helpful. Now you have to be careful that you're the one doing the thinking. Now view this like a friend who might read this and then give you feedback. But if your friend's writing your paper for you, and you all know it, you have, if you had kids, it's easy to give feedback to kids, and where it's essentially you're writing the paper. And everyone's heard of parents who they design their kids' science experiments and the kid wins the science fair, but it was actually the parent who did all the work. Um, you don't want Gemini to be doing that for you, because honestly, that's cheating. So the point is to have Gemini critique your papers, but not write them for you. Um, you can also use Google Drive and or Notebook LM as a source. Um, and what that'll do is it'll enable Gemini to uh, go through all your documents that might be relevant. Now you have to be careful, because you don't want to do that every time, and you have to consider. So I honestly don't use that very often, but if I had, say a lot of related research and I couldn't, upload it as different documents, then I would do that. Um, One of the other things you can do, this is more a work function, but you can, use a document as a template. I've actually in course design, one of the things we did is Canvas can, exports a course, but it's about 100 pages and it's really hard to read. And I wanted that to get converted into how it looks, exactly how it looks in Canvas. So I provided a template and I said, convert this 100-page document that's hard to read into this format, and it can do things along those lines. I also have used it to do things like attach our audited financial statements, and then I said, can you use the audited financial statements to complete the fields in the attached Form 990, and list it as, line by line of what I should put on. Now, it can't actually fill in the fields for me. That would be nice. But it can list the lines, and I used that this past year to help fill out our 990. And, you have to be careful whenever you're doing things like that. You need to check your numbers, because it can hallucinate, and all of a sudden you're putting in, made up numbers to a 990, which is a legal document. So that's important. Now, all of this has been on research side, but also I would highly encourage you to practice using creative features. So Notebook LM, get familiar with all the options: audio, video, mind map, infographics, slides, data table, and you have to think about what makes sense for the various things. I've been especially impressed with Notebook LM. Both the audio and the infographics are just amazing. The slides are really good too. Gemini, there's prompts you can use to create Google Slides. So that's different from Notebook LM slides, which are PDFs. The Google Slides you can edit yourself. Gemini, you can create images, music, video, coding, get familiar with the creative side. And then building organizational lists. So one of the main things we encourage you to do is to find peer organizations that you could identify best practices from. And we have a section in our AI prompt suggestion document where we encourage you to do that. So, the other thing that I would encourage you to think about is start with the big picture often, and do scoping, and then drill down. So as a strategy. So, so let me just kind of jump into this, and I'll start with the organizations. Then I'm going to show some of the other prompts. So, as an example, and we'll talk about this in more detail later, but what you need to do is build a peer organization list. In some cases, we already have that. And then you start with a broad organization scoping search. So in my case, I used 200 organizations, and I said, which of these organizations have the highest revenue from earned income, because I wanted to find organizations, rescue missions that had strong social enterprises. And then out of those, I created a prompt to the 15 organizations, and I provided the URLs for those. And then I said, okay, review all the social enterprises of these organizations, summarize what they provide, and then identify best practices. And then from that, you can identify experts to contact. Now, there's a couple other things I just want to say in terms of tips. Often, if you try to get Gemini and deep research to generate, sometimes you want it to generate a massive document, 40, 50 pages, or even maybe, something that could be as long as a book. And in most cases, it just can't handle writing a book. But what you can do is you can have your first general prompt, or more general prompt, and then you say, now add another section. And then that, what'll happen is if you give it too complex of a prompt, it won't be able to execute because it goes above what's called its token limit. And but if you say you're writing an outline for a paper that you want it to write, and there's 6 points or 6 sections of the paper, you give it the first 3 sections and your initial prompt, and then you feed it each of the next 3 sections one at a time, and you say, now add a section, and then you give the details of that section, and then add section 5, and you give the details of that. So that's just another tip that you can use in this. Now I'm going to go ahead and jump into some of the things that we have. So I mentioned that there's my AI public prompt log, so you can go through and you can look at the prompts that I've generated, and I'll keep adding these in here. And a lot of these you can see, I'm telling it its role. You're a consultant for the Gospel Rescue Mission movement, and it's this is pretty complicated. And some of these, you can see these are not Google searches, the types of things that I'm doing. So these are pretty. This in many ways it's an outline of a paper. So but an outline of a paper with kind of instructions that gives one line for each section. So I also mentioned there's this whole section on community of practice research and peer research. So we have the AI prompt suggestions and guidelines and research for City Vision. Each of these are kind of categories of templates, and the one that I want you to focus on is where we go through and we provide specific suggestions of how you can compile temps, or different categories of organizations, and create lists. So as I mentioned, these are the instructions for the broad organization search, how you could potentially narrow the best practices, and you could see examples of how we've done that on our website at rescuemissions.org. Now, if you are with a rescue mission, then what you can do is you can actually just paste these URLs, and usually I just paste the URLs. I'll say for the following list of organizations, the web addresses. So hopefully all this is helpful. Again, the main lesson in all of this is you're going to learn by doing. So just keep doing lots of prompts, and as you do that, you'll get better and better. And what's happening is you get better at prompt engineering, and AIs get better over time, and you'll be impressed overall with what you can do with this.